An Apache warrior came begging for milk. She nursed the baby and became the mother he needed. The child stirred first, a soft rustle beneath the homespun quilt. Then came the call of the mourning dove from the juniper tree, as if announcing mourning by sorrow alone. She was already awake, had been for hours, watching light gather slowly across the wooden beams, the sky bleeding its pale colors through slats. A world still waking, a world she no longer trusted. Her name was Eliza, though no one had spoken it in weeks. Out here, on the edge of the highland plains, names had little use. It was her baby boy who tethered her to the earth, all else having drifted like smoke since her husband was laid beneath it. The boy cooed now, tiny fists unfurling. She lifted him with arms that had learned to bear more than a child's weight. Grief, hunger, silence. She bared her breast, and he latched without fuss. This, at least, he understood. This she could still give. The land outside was brittle. Dust curled at the edges of the porch like a forgotten shawl. Fence posts leaned like old men in wind. The well needed new stones. The roof above the animals had begun to sag. Every day, she walked among these quiet failures and dared them to fall. By the time the sun had cleared the ridge, she was already outside, baby swaddled tight and tied across her front. Her boots sank slightly into the loose earth as she filled the tin pail to pump and slopped grain for the hens. The mule brayed once in greeting or complaint, and she murmured back, low and steady, her voice a lullaby without melody. Her speech had become like that lately, meant more for calming the space around her than for being heard. It was near midday when she saw the dust first, just a twitch on the far edge of the flat land where the world blurred into sky. She straightened. No one came from that way, not willingly, not unless they were running from something or to it. She shaded her eyes and waited. Dust rose again. A rider. Her heart did not quicken. Fear, for her, no longer arrived with a rush. It came slowly with recognition. She lifted the boy and retreated inside, fingers quick on the bolt. Through the narrow window, she watched. The horse limped. The rider sat low in the saddle, slumped, cradling something close. Not a weapon. A bundle. She hesitated, then reached for the rifle anyway. Her late husband's, oil-worn and trusted, and leaned it against the doorframe. Minutes passed. Then the rider dismounted with care, knees buckling slightly. He said nothing, didn't even raise his head, just walked to the edge of the porch and sank to one knee, placing the bundle on the boards before him like an offering. The baby inside gave a soft, dry cough. She opened the door slowly, the boy on her hip. The rifle stayed in reach. The man looked up, an Apache. His hair was long and unbound, his face etched by sun and scars both fresh and old. Not young, not old. His eyes were dark, not in color but in weight. She had seen that look before, on men who had seen too much, carried too much, and still walked. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He swallowed hard, then rasped, "Milk, please." The baby girl in the bundle whimpered now, barely a sound. Skin grayish, lips dry. She hadn't been fed in days. Eliza said nothing. Her boy stirred against her chest, sated and warm. Her heart tugged, not at the man but at the child. She stepped forward cautious and lifted the bundle. "You carry her like she's yours," she said softly, not expecting an answer. He nodded once. Sister's child. "She alive?" He shook his head. Eliza stood still. The wind picked up, catching her skirt and carrying the scent of the parched earth. Then she turned, holding both children now, and stepped inside. She laid her son in the cradle and pulled aside her blouse again. The girl latched with a desperation that broke something in her. The Apache remained kneeling outside. He did not enter. She let him stay there a long while. When she opened the door again, the baby girl slept on a full belly, tucked beside her son. Eliza handed the man a tin cup of water. He drank it slow, each sip measured. "You have a name?" she asked. He nodded. "Nantan." "Means?" "Spokesman. But I don't speak well." "You've said enough." He looked to the doorway, eyes searching. "She live?" "She does now." A long silence passed between them, full of words neither had the courage nor language for. She nodded toward the barn. "You can bed there. Tonight only." He dipped his head in thanks, not quite bowing. She noticed then that his hand shook slightly as he gathered his gear, not from weakness, but restraint. That night, as the children slept, she stood by the window with the rifle in hand, just in case. But the barn stayed still. No sound but the breath of animals and the occasional cough of settling wood. She should have been uneasy. Instead, she felt a strange hush inside her, not peace exactly, but something that resembled a memory of it. In the morning, he was still there. He had already drawn water, fed the mule, and was scraping the chicken coop clean. He nodded at her without expectation. Not gratitude, not assumption, just presence. She said nothing, only handed him a crust of bread, and moved on with the day. Later, she watched him hold the baby girl, while she nursed both children again. He kept his eyes lowered, as though not to trespass on the moment, but she saw his jaw tighten, his shoulders shift slightly, like a man remembering what it meant to hope. By evening, the babies had begun to mirror each other, breathing in rhythm, fingers sometimes entwining in sleep. Eliza watched them, her hands still from all work. The cabin felt less empty, not full, but less hollow. She stepped onto the porch just before nightfall. The wind had changed direction, cooler now, and the sky blazed orange behind the western hills. Nanton stood beside the fence, hands resting on the top rail, watching the sky as if looking for something far older than time. "She has no name," he said without turning. Eliza blinked, caught off guard. "Your niece?" He nodded. "Maybe you should give her one." "I was waiting," he said, "to see if she'd live. And now—" He looked at her then, long and steady. "Atsa, eagle, because she survived the fall." Eliza didn't reply, only nodded once, slow and solemn. Then she turned and went inside. That night, after both babies had fallen into deep, milk-heavy sleep, Eliza stood at the cradle and laid a finger against each tiny chest, one rising with her blood, the other with another woman's, now gone. She did not try to understand what had changed. She only knew that something had. Not everything breaks when it falls. And something inside her whispered that the story was not yet done. By the fourth morning, she no longer watched him with suspicion. He begun tending chores before dawn, quiet as fog rolling off the low hills. Eliza would rise to find the woodpile stacked, the mule brushed, the hens fed. Nana never asked what to do. He simply looked around and did what needed doing. She had not known a man like that. He still slept in the barn, laid out on a straw mat beneath the loft ladder, his rifle always close. Not once had he asked for more than a place to lie his bones or a crust of bread to break. In the evenings, he'd sit near the porch with little Atsa in his arms, humming in a tongue Eliza didn't understand but felt in her marrow low, round sounds like wind through hollow rock. Sometimes the baby would smile in her sleep, a curve of peace on a face too young to know sorrow. There were no questions between them, not yet, only the rhythm of work and the shared breath of children. But the land kept its own counsel, and the town beyond the ridge did not stay quiet for long. Nettie was the first to arrive. The old midwife came once a month, whether invited or not, her mule cart full of dried herbs, gossip, and news folded into careful whispers. She smelled like rosemary and old wool, and her hands were always warm. Eliza had known her since girlhood, and in the months after the burial. Nettie had been the only one who'd stayed longer than a prayer. Now, she squinted at Nantan from behind her spectacles as he passed by with a pail of well water. He offered a nod. She didn't return it. "You taking in strays now?" she asked Eliza, after settling inside with a cup of boiled chicory. "Seems I am," Eliza answered. "That man's Apache. I notice." Nettie gave her a long look, the kind that rustled dry leaves no wind had touched. Eliza glanced toward the cradle, where both children now lay curled like kittens. "He brought her here. Starving. His sister's girl. He asked nothing, gave everything. The rest hasn't seemed to matter much." Nettie leaned back, her face unreadable. "I won't tell you what to do. But kindness paints a woman's name on the wind, and that kind of wind brings watchers." She meant Deputy Carver, and others like him. Men who saw the world as fixed things, white and red, good and evil, proper and shameful. I'm not hiding, Eliza said. No, Nettie agreed, but you are healing. That makes you easier to wound. Later, Nantan entered to check the firebox, and the midwife watched him without speaking. Before she left, she touched his shoulder gently and said something soft, something he did not expect. He dipped his head once, but his eyes lingered on Eliza a little longer that evening, as if trying to read the language that lived in her silences. Days stretched into weeks, and the work moved like music. Together they planted late beans in the dry garden bed, their hands side by side in the warm earth. He built a new chicken run from old fencing, and she showed him how to grind flour with her mother's stone mill. The babies began to thrive. Atsa put on weight, and her eyes, deep bottomless, began to follow sound. Her son, Eli, now rolled belly to back and back again, giggling with wild abandon each time she kissed his toes. One morning, Nantan brought her a gift. It was carved from cedar, no larger than her palm, a rattle in the shape of a curl fawn, delicate and alive with detail. He placed it on the windowsill wordlessly, and she touched it with reverence, marveling at its quiet beauty. There was no ceremony, no declaration, just the offering and the knowing. But even in silence, stories root and spread. It was a Tuesday when the deputy rode up, his badge dull in the afternoon sun, dust on his boots and a smirk on his face. Carver had always been polite in a cutting way, sharp words sheathed in smiles, the kind that made your skin feel too tight. Eliza met him on the porch, arms folded. The rifle leaned by the door, visible but untouched. Didn't figure you for the charitable type, he said, nodding toward the yard, where Nantan was splitting kindling. I figure on often, too, she replied. Carver's smile grew wider. You got 2 babes in there now? I do. Funny thing, he said. Town says one of them don't look much like you. She said nothing, let the silence stretch until it turned brittle. You ought to be careful who you let cross your threshold, he continued, reins creaking as he shifted. Folks start talking, and talk turns into trouble out here. Behind her, the wind shifted. She could smell rain coming. You're welcome to turn around now, she said. He leaned in his saddle. Just doing my job, ma'am. Making sure things are decent. Her eyes didn't flinch. Then you'll know the difference between decency and cruelty. He let out a short breath through his nose, then tipped his hat. Afternoon, Eliza. And he rode off slow, leaving his warning behind like mud on a clean floor. That night, the storm came. They brought in the animals, shuttered the windows, set pails beneath the roof's weak spots. As lightning cracked and wind clawed at the chimney, Eliza sat between the 2 cradles, her hands steady, but her thoughts running like floodwater. Nantan sat across the hearth, elbows on his knees. The firelight touched the angles of his face, and for the first time, he spoke without her asking. I was a rider, he said, with the White Mountain Band. We raided once, for horses, for revenge. I saw blood feed the dust. She waited. My sister, Casa, left, took the baby with her, wanted peace. I followed days later, found her dying. His voice cracked on the last word. He didn't clear it. She made me promise. Raise her child like she was mine. You kept that promise, Eliza said. He looked up, not alone. And in that moment, the distance between them shortened, not in inches, but in ache. They shared the same country of loss, of choices made when no good ones remained. And in that country, trust had begun to sprout, not suddenly, but with roots deep and unseen. That night, when the babies stirred and whimpered, they both rose. She held Atsa. He held Eli, rocking them gently, side by side, as the thunder rolled far out on the plains and the rain tapped its lullaby on the tin roof above. Come morning, the storm had passed. The air smelled clean. The fence still stood. The children laughed at birdsong. And though nothing had been spoken, Eliza knew something had changed. Not in the world, which still turned mean and suspicious. But here, in this small space between 2 quiet souls and 2 growing children, it wasn't safety, not yet, but it was something worth protecting. The morning came brittle and quiet. the kind of stillness that settles before something breaks. Eliza stood at the edge of the porch, a tin basin in her hands, rinsing cloth diapers beneath the cold spigot. The sky was flat and pale. Clouds hung low like a ceiling about to cave. She didn't see the riders until the first hoof struck stone near the bluff. 3 men, 1 badge. Deputy Carver in front, his posture sharp and righteous as a drawn blade. Behind him, 2 ranch hands from a north boundary. Brody and Haynes, men whose mouths always curled around a sneer when they looked at her. Carver dismounted slowly, brushing dust from his sleeve like he'd come for church. "Morning, Miss Eliza," he said. "We got business today." She didn't answer, just laid the basin down and stepped slightly in front of the door. Brody leaned sideways in his saddle. "Word is you're keeping an Apache's child in there, one that don't belong to you." "Funny," she said, voice calm. "Seems like she belongs exactly where she's wanted." Carver's smile stayed thin. "We got a report that the child was taken from her kin, that the man who brought her, he ain't blood, nor is he legal guardian. She'd have been dead if not for him." "Maybe, but that ain't how custody works." Eliza stepped forward, boots scraping dry wood. "And since when do you care about children not dying?" Carver's jaw twitched. "We're taking the baby in for questioning. You too, if you don't hand her over quiet." Inside, Atza began to cry. It wasn't loud, just a soft, confused sound, like something waking from a dream it didn't want to leave. Nanan stepped into the doorway behind her, holding both children in his arms. Eli cradled on one side, Atza nestled tight against his chest. He looked at no one, but his presence filled the air like thunder before the first strike. The deputy's hand drifted to his belt. "She comes with us. That's all there is to it." Eliza shook her head slowly. "No." Haynes snorted. "You gonna stop us?" And for a moment, no one moved, not even the wind. Then Nantan did something none of them expected. He stepped forward, slow, careful, and set both children down into Eliza's arms. He raised his hands, palms open, unarmed. "I will go," he said. Carver blinked. "Say again." "I go with you. Speak what I know. Let the woman and children stay." Eliza felt the weight of both babies against her heart. It took everything not to call out, to not pull him back. But Nanan only looked at her once. Long enough. His eyes were steady. And behind the quiet, she saw something deeper, a choice made long before this day. They tied his hands. Not tight, not cruel, but with ceremony, as if reminding him and her that justice was still a thing owned by the loudest men in town. Eliza watched them ride off, the wind lifting dust into long ribbons behind them. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Just stood holding 2 children who had just lost a man who made them feel safe. The trail to town took hours. She knew it well, too well. By dusk, she had packed a satchel, tied both babies to her back and front, and saddled the mule. She didn't knock on Nettie's door when she passed, just looked at her through the window. Nettie nodded once and handed her a tin of honey biscuits for the road. The town looked smaller when you arrived, carrying purpose. She walked straight to the jailhouse. Her boots clicked against the wood floor as she pushed the door open. Carver sat behind the desk, boots crossed, playing with a coin. "You come to turn yourself in?" he asked, voice too smooth. "I came to bring the truth." She handed him the birth ribbon from Nanton's satchel. Soft deer hide with the girl's name stitched in Apache, wrapped around the prayer feather Casa had worn when she passed. This child was orphaned. She was dying. He saved her. I saved her. That's the whole of it. "That may be," Carver said, flipping the coin again. "But this town don't take kindly to cross-blood families." "She ain't cross-blood," Eliza said, "but she is loved." Carver stood. "That's not the law." "No," said a voice behind them, "but it's enough for God." Nettie stepped in then, shoulders squared, apron still dusty from baking. "I was midwife to Eliza's child. I've seen that Apache feed, clothe, and raise that girl like his own, and I'll stand witness." Brody frowned from the corner. "Since when do we take the word of women?" "Since now," said Nettie, fire in her bones. "Or I take my hands and herbs and leave this town to birth its own stillborns. That changed the room. Nantan was let out from the cell, wrists red where the rope had rubbed. He looked first at the babies, then to Eliza. His breath caught, but he said nothing. Carver waved a hand, half in surrender. You want to walk out of here with that child? Fine. But you keep trouble off this street. We intend to, Eliza said, but it has a way of following the people it fears. They left town in silence, except for the cooing of the children and the scuff of boots on dry plank. At the edge of the mesa, under the rust glow of a setting sun, Eliza stopped and turned to Nantan. They were never going to listen, she said. I know. Then why go with them? He looked to the babies, both now sleeping, because love does not run. It stands. Eliza reached up and touched his jaw, just barely, her fingers brushing skin like someone reading a story they were too scared to start before now. And if I said, we don't have to go back to before? He looked at her fully then, eyes wide, vulnerable. Then I'd say I've already burned that map. The stars came out one by one, as if daring the night to be soft. They rode slow, the four of them, into the dark, not towards safety, not towards certainty, but towards something unspoken that had begun to bloom in a quiet storm they'd weathered together. The morning sky burned like coals under wind. Red streaked the horizon in fierce brushstrokes, and the air held that taut, watchful hush that warned of something coming. Not a storm, not yet, but something. Eliza felt it in her joints before the sun even rose. A heat behind the eyes, a prickle in the breath. She watched Nantan move across the yard, a yoke balanced across his shoulders, buckets full of well water swinging in rhythm. His shadow was longer these days, more solid. It felt, at last, like the land accepted him. The children played in the dust beside the steps. Atza had begun toddling, her steps wobbly but sure, her little hands quick to catch Eli when he toppled beside her. They didn't know the world's weight yet. They didn't know it was trying to take something back. By midday, the riders came. For this time, she knew the led one, Randall Mott, owner of the largest ranch south of the bluff. He'd once offered to buy her land for a fraction of its worth. When she refused, his men burned her fence and killed her mule. Her husband had gone to reason with him. He never came back. Nantan met her by the barn door, jaw tight. They've come to finish what they started, she said. He didn't nod. He didn't need to. The air around them thickened like rising smoke. Randall dismounted first, his boots striking the ground like he owned it. The others stayed in the saddle, hands resting on their rifles. You got something that doesn't belong to you, he said, voice full of certainty only money gives. Eliza stepped forward. You'll have to be more specific. I've got a lot that folks think I don't deserve. Randall's eyes slid toward Nantan, then the children behind the doorway. You're harboring a red bastard and raising his child on white land. That's the line. There is no line, she said. Not here. Not anymore. One of the men shifted in his saddle. The creak of leather was louder than it should have been. The wind stilled. A hawk circled high above, its cry sharp against the silence. Nantan stepped forward, unarmed, but steady. We built peace with our hands. You come to tear it down, we will not bow. Randall sneered. This land's never belonged to your kind. And any white woman who lays down with an Apache forfeits her protection. That's when the rifle cracked. The shot didn't hit, but it came from the ridge. A warning. More riders appeared on the bluff. Half a dozen. All locals. Farmers. Widows. 2 old veterans from the war. Nettie was among them. Her skirts dust-stained, a long rifle slung across her saddle like a sash. Randall turned slowly, realizing for the first time that the world had changed behind his back. You think this saves you, he spat. No, Eliza said, her voice soft and iron. But it saves you from what you become if you follow through. Randall hesitated. Rage wrestled pride, but he wasn't built for martyrdom. He turned without another word, mounted up, and rode out. The others followed, eyes low. The dust they kicked up settled slow, like regret. When the last hoofbeat faded, Eliza dropped to one knee beside the doorway and gathered the children close. Nantan stood still for a long while, then exhaled like he hadn't in years. That night, no one spoke of the danger, or the line that had been held. Instead, Nanton lit a small fire out back, and Eliza cooked cornbread with honey. The babies laughed at shadows, and for a while the world sounded like a hymn. When the stars bloomed overhead, he turned to her, voice low. "You never asked why I stayed." She looked at him, brow lined with a tired grace. "Because we saw each other." He nodded, then reached into his satchel and pulled out a thin, folded cloth. Inside it, a string of carved bone beads and one small obsidian feather. "My mother gave this to my sister when she birthed Atsa. It was meant for the one who would raise her." Eliza held it in her hands. The weight of it didn't come from the material. It came from the meaning. She looked up. "Then it belongs here." He didn't say the word for what they were now. He didn't have to. It was in the way he touched her hand, the way the children leaned into them both, the way silence had become a language they shared. In the weeks that followed, the land softened. A second mule was gifted from a farmer upriver. Fence posts were mended by neighbors who'd once passed with downcast eyes. Even Carver came once, hat in hand, muttering something about law and conscience, and walking the long road back from shame. They took nothing from it but peace. And in time, the cabin filled not with wealth, but with warmth. 2 children grew strong. A man found his place. A woman remembered how to laugh without breaking inside. The world beyond still held its fire and its hatred. But here, on this little plot of earth, something better had rooted. Not perfect, but true. And on a morning not unlike the one when he first arrived, sky cracked open with crimson and wind tasting of stories. The 4 of them stood on the porch, watching birds rise from the cottonwoods. Eliza looked down at her son and the girl she nursed into life, both now giggling over a beetle in the dust. She reached for Nanton's hand. "You reckon they'll ever know how hard it was?" He gave a faint smile. "They'll know it was worth it." The wind moved through the grass like fingers through hair. And somewhere inside the hush, the old voice of the land whispered, "Love is not built in thunder, but in the spaces between, in bread shared, in children held, in the hands that stay." The fire inside the cabin flickered. The day ahead waited wide and bright, and they stepped into it, not broken, not bowed, but whole. If this tale touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more slow-burning stories of love, courage, and quiet strength. Your support helps these old soul stories ride a little further down the trail.